Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Caprice Taylor. Aquí con Juntos Podemos. Together we can. My name is Caprice Taylor, where we celebrate co-creators of a kinder and more just world. Every Monday here in La Voz Hispana Radio of Connecticut on 103.5 FM. Thank you for being with us today. And as always, when you hear another language, do not turn that dial, for the show is bilingual in an effort to embrace our community as much as possible. Cuando escuchen cuando estamos hablando inglés, por favor, no cambien esta sintonización porque, como siempre, es un programa bilingüe para dar un fuerte abrazo a nuestra comunidad diversa. Y celebramos aquí cada lunes co-creadores de un mundo mejor y tenemos con nosotros a un líder comunitario abogando para mejorar la salud de todos seres humanos aquí en el estado de Connecticut. Pero antes de eso, antes de introducir a nuestra persona de hoy, quiero introducirles a una obra que por el momento van a abrir las puertas en un teatro en Nueva York. Los boletos lo pueden conseguir hoy y vamos a escuchar un poco sobre esta obra, el escritor desde New Haven, Connecticut, que todos los días trabaja para mejorar la comunidad, especialmente trabajando con los jóvenes, y a la misma vez es un autor de varias obras, producciones por varios años, casi yo creo 2 décadas, y eso es el autor Steve Griffin. Vamos a escuchar un poco. We're going to hear a little bit of Death by a Thousand Cuts.
When talking with men who had lost their children to gun violence. And with that, I was listening to their stories and was just blown away. And it really made me think about not only their stories, but my story and men of color, right? Because it was like the men were all men who experienced some type of trauma like that loss. So, and then I started talking to other groups, and really what came of this was this whole concept of 1,000 cuts, right? So what we go through, those little microaggressions, and we get them from childhood all the way up till we grow up. And for men, we deal with it, right? And because we're not really given that outlet or opportunity, and it comes out all kinds of different ways. So this is really an opportunity to just share the experiences. And I think I kind of said like it digs up the ruins, because that's how deep it goes, and you know, of what our experiences are. And
this is my first encounter with the man who suddenly appeared like a magician. And like Darth Vader said, I am your father. Well, I guess he couldn't come up with the idea himself. So my mother thought it would be a good look for him to take me to our neighborhood park so we could have some bonding time. You know, a heart to heart. It ain't all about white
People. It's about joy.
Yeah,
right.
and pain.
Hey, come on. It's like sunshine
Hey,
and rain.
Let me hear you sing it.
joy.
Huh.
Yeah,
And pain.
all right.
It's like sunshine and rain. But this ain't no song. And I don't always feel like singing.
But I do sometimes feel like wringing someone's neck.
but I can't. I gotta keep myself politically correct and keep all that shit inside.
This is Death by a Thousand Cuts, a requiem for Black and Brown men, written and directed by Steve Griffin. And you can get your tickets now for a show in New York City this weekend, Saturday, October 21st at 1:30 p.m. And for more information, you can get these tickets by going to Marjorie S. Dean Little Theater. Marjorie S. Dean, Deane, Little Theater on 10 West 64th Street in New York. So if you really want to get in touch with humanity and understand the reality of some of our Black and brown men, Death by a Thousand Cuts, watching I got the privilege to watch and hear the reading, and your heart will be blown open at the actual play. My heart was blown open as well. So Steve Driffin is our local theater director and playwright from Connecticut. So go out and support our Connecticut brother out in New York this weekend. So hopefully you'll be able to catch this show. And in line with our topic today is Game Changers. We have a special guest, Stephanie Clark, who's also the founder of Black Health Collective. And welcome, Stephanie. Thank you for being with us today. Bienvenida, Stephanie, que también una fundadora del Colectivo para la Salud de nuestra comunidad negra. Thank you so much. So did you hear a little bit of the snippet of this play by Steve Driffin?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So my first thoughts were I wish that I had an opportunity to see it. One of the priority health issues for the Black Health Collective is our mental health. And we have a young man who is doing some amazing work of his own of like disrupting the narrative around mental health with men of color. He wrote a 6-track album called Beautiful Trauma. His name is Frank Pomenares. He is absolutely amazing as an artist, as a videographer, businessman, and human being. Excuse me. And he wrote this album, and then we had an event at the end of June called Group Therapy, where he performed his album with a live band and then would come down off the stage and sit in a chair across from a clinician and had his first ever therapy session in real time. It was powerful. And so
talk about the bravery as well.
Absolutely. And, part of his message is normalizing getting into care, whatever care looks like. So to see this other performing arts as a way of dealing with trauma for Black men, it's wonderful. I love that all these conversations are happening around our Black, brown, and Indigenous men, because there's so much healing that needs to be done for all of us, all of these communities, for men, as much as us. So I love.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm just going to translate a little bit of what you shared. La señora Stephanie Clark, la fundadora del Colectivo para la Salud Negra, ella nos dio su opinión sobre lo que escuchó por la primera vez sobre el tema de esta obra, escrito por Steve Driffin, y hay boletos disponibles para Nueva York. Y para más información pueden entrar a nuestra página en Facebook y ahí van a poder ver el anuncio con la dirección del teatro. Y el tema es sobre la salud mental de los hombres negros y latinos, que muchas veces los hombres no se sienten confortables en hablar sobre sus preocupaciones, el trauma y sus emociones, que desde la niñez, una gran historia de trauma que empezó desde la niñez, y había un grupo de hombres aquí en Connecticut, se reunieron y empezaron a compartir sus experiencias en la pérdida de hijos, en la violencia de pistola. Y por la primera vez muchos de ellos compartieron las historias, y de allí fue lo que sembró la idea de hacer esta obra. And Steve Driffin shared with me that in the making of this play, it first launched here in Connecticut, and by popular demand, they actually launched a few iterations of it all happening this year. And then they were asked to go to New York, and audience members, older men, young men, standing up, Black, brown men, and saying, you know, I never told anyone my story. I saw my life reflected on the stage. Those were the points of pain and trauma, and feeling the sense of isolation and suffering alone. And so they decided to have, where possible, therapists present in the room. And some theaters now do talk back, where you get to talk to the director, you get to talk to the actors, and they actually, their talk back became a therapy session, noting that audience members needed extra support. And this actually opened up a pathway for healing, where they never really had thought of themselves as walking into a therapy session, and really providing the opportunity to feel supported for the first time. So I'd love, Steve Griffin, to meet Frank Pulmonaries. La señora Stephanie Clark dice de que ella también en el colectivo, trabajando con un joven que creó un disco de varias canciones, y tomando en cuenta el tema de la salud mental de hombres, cómo pueden mejorar la situación. En muchos casos, los hombres latinos y afroamericanos no buscan socorro, no buscan asistencia. Y después de tocar en vivo su música, en junio fue la primera vez para el público, y tuvieron un terapista ahí presentes. And so one of the reasons why I invited you, Stephanie, because you are so committed to the well-being of our community, and I would say even throughout Connecticut. And I have to be very honest and open with our public. I have the blessing of working with you as one of my board members at Universal Healthcare Foundation of Connecticut. And I'm already a big fan of yours. And that's why I was like, please come on my little radio show. And you have a deep commitment to the well-being of all. And raised in Connecticut, the times have to change faster, meaning every day the clock is ticking. There are people suffering. Brown, Black men. The author of the play spoke about microaggressions. And then there's this concept that I keep hearing more and more, and which is outside of microaggressions, they're actually intentionally set up violent policies and regulations and laws. And violence can happen, indirect violence and direct violence to someone's physical well-being, direct, and then there's indirect violence. And many of our systems have laws and rules and norms of going about doing business that is actually quite harmful. And so Black Health Collective is born. Can you connect the dots for me around that?
Absolutely. So I'm gonna get just a little bit into the history of like how the Black Health Collective came to be. So the folks on the Health Improvement Collaborative of Southeastern Connecticut, when we did the 2016 Community Health Needs Assessment, we looked at the data and it showed that a large number of folks self-reported to have diabetes, hypertension, minimal physical activity, and a large number of them were folks who identified as Black folks. And so a work group, an action team was created, and it was called the Healthy Lifestyles Group. And I was part of it, mainly because when I was working at the health department before, I had overseen a grant program to reduce risk factors for heart disease and stroke for Black folks in the region. So it just made sense that I would be part of this effort. And it was a long and hard process being part of this group who often made recommendations and suggestions that did not ever center the target population. So when we were working on the 2019 health needs assessment, I said to my fellow leadership team members, I was like, listen, I can't do this for another 3 years. I need to be able to focus on Black folks or I have to go rogue. I can't do it. And so they said, well, we used to have the African American Health Council Southeastern Connecticut. And I was like, yeah, we did. And they were like, well, why don't you just sort of 2.0 that? And that's sort of how we were born. So we dissolved the Healthy Lifestyles group and had a soft launch not too long before the pandemic hit of the Black Health Collective, which is really about doing whatever we can to improve Black health by centering our stories, our voices, our experiences, and our expertise. So I'm going to pause. If you want to.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Pues estábamos hablando, Stephanie y yo, unos días atrás, y era sobre la diferencia entre violencia directa física y violencia indirecta, donde hay mucho daño en los seres queridos, los humanos, por causa de pólizas, leyes, regulaciones, maneras de trabajar en instituciones, en sistemas, en gobierno, y que sí existe violencia indirecta acá en Connecticut, y de ahí le pedí a Stephanie si puede explicar la conexión en tratar de disminuir esa violencia detrás de el trabajo de el colectivo para la salud para personas negras. Y ella dice que en 2016 ella estaba trabajando en la área de salud pública y estaba trabajando con creando vidas saludables, estilo de vida saludable, una coalición. Y detrás de eso tenían fondos para estudiar, conocer mejor cuáles eran las barreras que las comunidades negras latinas tenían que enfrentar sobre la salud. Y anotó de que muchos tenían diabetes en su vida, la presencia de hipertensión, bajos niveles de ejercicio, y de ahí 3 años después para hacer el nuevo estudio otra vez, y anotó que gente también tenía afección cardíaca, cerebrovascular, problemas también otra vez de hipertensión, y ella dijo, ya basta, ya no puedo estar trabajando con la comunidad cada vez sobre el tema de los problemas y qué se va a hacer, cómo vamos a solucionar y prevenir estos problemas de salud. Y de allí formaron el colectivo para la salud negra, y basado en las historias de las personas parte de este colectivo, sus experiencias y también su sabiduría, que también tienen sabiduría a alto nivel sobre estos temas, y ver cómo es que pueden solucionar la situación. Yes, please continue. And so here talking about the not just the history and experiences, but also the wisdom and the knowledge and the expertise.
Yeah, so one of the first things we did when we got reactivated at some point during the pandemic was to, while the most recent iteration of the community health needs assessment was happening, we decided to do a community health needs assessment of Black folks in the region, right? Because typically we always hear, well, there's not enough data for Black folks, brown folks, indigenous folks, to sort of have like a good cross tabulation of, comparison. So I reached out to a good friend, Mark Abraham over at Data Haven, and I just said, hey, I have some questions, and I was wondering if I can use some of your well-being survey questions, to do a survey specifically for Black folks. And didn't really have a communication strategy to do it. I was just like, hey, we should try this, see if it works. And it did. We got 116 folks who took the survey, and of them, we can use 110. We're working on creating a report and some other infographics about like what the data looks like, and also making sure that we do it with a structural analysis, right? So we're not just going to report out like this percentage of folks say this and this percentage of folks say this is like their lived experience, this is what the chronic disease that they're living with, these are the troubles they're having. We're also going to talk about how the systems contribute to that. Because if we don't, then all we're doing is further demonizing and dehumanizing folks for their lives, and enough of that. We're not doing any of that. We're not doing anything where we're allowing folks to make decisions about our health in a vacuum. We want to be very intentional about saying this is the report, and this is why. We're going to talk about how these systems, these institutions have, to your point, these policies and these practices that are literally killing us.
I'll just translate this real quick, and while I'm translating, I also want to ask you the question. So this is part of changing the situation, changing the trajectory, not repeating the same things that we've been doing for decades, but really getting to solving the problems, and nothing about us without us. So having it being centered, the voice of the people. What other game-changing aspects should we be implementing now? Because we can't go back to the past. The pandemic hit, now more people are awakened to the inequities, racial inequities in Connecticut, and how COVID actually harmed at greater rates Black, brown folks. And economically, we're still suffering at that level. So what else should we think of? If you had the audience of legislators right now, what would be game-changing for Connecticut? And I'm going to translate what you just shared, so hold that thought. Stephanie dice de que lo que querían hacer era cambiar, mejorar la situación para la gente negra, latina aquí, en la parte sur de Connecticut, sureste, y decidieron poder obtener información, datos, que muchas veces los sistemas funcionan con datos, y queriendo colectar la realidad de la mayoría, lo posible, aumentar información sobre la realidad de nuestros miembros de la comunidad negra, y crearon una encuesta utilizando las encuestas de que hay una organización sin fines de lucro que se llama Data Haven, que colecta una cantidad de encuestas en diferentes ciudades aquí en Connecticut para poder recolectar información y medir mejoramiento o empeoramiento de la salud de la comunidad y de los individuos dentro de esa comunidad, y sabiendo también de que muchas investigaciones, colección de datos, le faltaba la voz, experiencia y opiniones de las personas negras, especialmente hombres negros. Y con eso, Stephanie hizo una iniciativa para obtener la información directa de las bocas de los hombres negros de sureste de Connecticut. Y en el primer año obtuvieron 116, llenaron la encuesta y pudieron usar 110 de esos que lo llenaron completamente. Y esto va más allá de lo que nosotros conocemos en ciertas comunidades de nuestros hombres negros y latinos. Y de allí querían también enfocarse no solamente en el comportamiento del individuo y cómo es que impacta la salud de uno, pero también entendiendo, mejorando el entendimiento en cómo los sistemas también impacta al individuo, porque los individuos son impactados por sistemas, las estructuras del gobierno, de las escuelas, del trabajo, todas las instituciones que uno tiene que tener una relación en la vida cotidiana. Y de ahí le pregunté a Stephanie, levantando la voz de la gente que muchas veces han sido calladas por los sistemas o ignoradas o los han hecho invisibles. Y el proyecto que ha hecho Stephanie es parar la invisibilidad, a que sean visibles, a que tengan voz y a que las decisiones que los sistemas toman, las pólizas, las prácticas, tienen que estar centradas, sabiendo, conociendo, escuchando la voz de las personas impactadas por esos sistemas. Y le pregunté a Stephanie qué otro punto debemos de tomar en cuenta para cambiar la situación, para mejorar la situación de muchos aquí en Connecticut. En este momento, más de 40% de la gente de Connecticut le falta dinero, le falta oportunidad para mejorar su situación. Muchos tienen 1 o 2 trabajos y 40% todavía no tienen suficiente para pagar mensualmente, y eso impacta negativamente a la salud. And so, going back to the question that I posed earlier, 40%, again, the United Way Alice report, recent report indicated that over 40% of Connecticut households that work 1 or 2 jobs are making below survival wages. They're not able to make ends meet in the basic needs that they have to have funds for. And so the game changer, what other ways should our elected officials look at and approach making the lives better for Connecticut's residents?
That's a really good question. I would actually take it to some of the folks who head up a lot of our state institutions, right? So the Department of Public Health, the Department of Social Services. If we are going on record as saying that, whatever percentage of a person's health happens within the clinical setting, but a larger percentage happens outside, right? So like where you work, where you live, how much money you're able to make, what you're eating, the amount of education you have. It makes sense for these agencies to figure out a way to blend some of their resources, right? And not leave it up to philanthropy or to leave it up to the primary care providers. Like if you are saying that a lot of the stuff that happens, a lot of these social drivers of health, they call them, are happening outside of the clinical setting, then it stands to reason that in addition to wanting philanthropy to show up and wanting primary care to show up differently, that you all would figure out a way to better support the nonprofit organizations and institutions who are already providing so many, services, needed services to everyone. So like making sure that they have what they need to adequately take care of folks. And then consider like examining all of the ways that like their grant programs are structured. So if that means like getting OPM involved, okay. Because if it is an oppressive process to be able to even get access to those resources, then these communities are going to continue to suffer, be sicker, die earlier. So like, don't put it off on everyone else to do. Take some time and figure out a way to marry some of your money, because if all of your priorities and your mission statements for each of these organizations are about enhancing and advancing the lives of Connecticut residents, then figure out a way to do that that doesn't pit a bunch of folks who are out here on the ground doing the work against each other. Try that.
Thank you for that. I'll just translate. También si Stephanie tuviera el oído de los legisladores, quisiera que ellos tomen en cuenta el rol y papel que el Departamento de Salud hace a los servicios sociales, todos los departamentos gubernamentales, y tomando en cuenta que por una parte la relación que uno tiene como individuo con el sistema de salud es una parte bien pequeña de la salud de un ser humano, que también es otras áreas de la vida. Uno tiene que tomar en cuenta donde uno trabaja, el tipo de trabajo, la situación del trabajo, y impacta la salud también, a donde uno vive, el nivel de ingreso, lo que uno come, el nivel de educación. Y eso requiere que el gobierno también empiece a combinar recursos de diferentes agencias o departamentos a nivel estatal, y también trabajando con los doctores primarios de las personas. Pero todos estos factores sociales impactan el nivel de salud de un ser humano, y también deben de tomar en cuenta las varias organizaciones sin fines de lucro que aportan para mejorar la situación de individuos, de comunidades, y el gobierno debe de brindar un gran esfuerzo en apoyarles a ellos a que sean más fuertes, especialmente las organizaciones que conocen a la comunidad, y deben de examinar también la manera en la cual distribuyen fondos, porque si los grupos comunitarios que conocen bien y pueden hacer un gran labor, pero el gobierno no les permite por falta de poder acceder los fondos. Es importante en la distribución de fondos que hay igualdad también, que los grupos pueden conseguir estos fondos. Y por favor, dice Stephanie, hay que parar la competición de grupo entre grupo para esos fondos limitados. Los sistemas, el gobierno tiene que ver más allá para, en lugar de crear competencia entre grupos comunitarios, grupos sin fines de lucro, pero mejorar colaboración entre esos grupos. And so I'm so glad that you talked about competition to try to stop competing for the very limited funds, but that's up to how the funds are distributed. And then there's one last aspect that I want to talk about, which is also the lack of funding BIPOC-led groups, where they're bigger, larger institutions that are further removed from the community, that are further removed from the voices and experiences and the knowledge and the wisdom of community. They get the money, and then when the money's about to run out, they give like a fifth or an eighth or a tenth of the funds that they received to the groups that are embedded in the community, trusted by the community, and know the solutions. And then they're supposed to do all the work that this larger entity supposedly took the money for. I have seen that over and over again.
That's super frustrating. So as someone who spent a little time in philanthropy and who heard on several occasions, like, trying to engage Black and Brown led organizations and institutions, it's interesting to hear how folks in philanthropy felt those organizations needed to be vetted, right? Like in a way that they wouldn't for a larger, predominantly white organization or institution. So something as simple as that, it already gives like this instant air of mistrust. Like you have to make sure that they're good enough. But how do you qualify to consider them good enough to do their work? Like there's a bit of a disconnect. And so there are groups like SOCT, supporting organizing work, which is one of the, I believe, affinity groups from the Connecticut Council for Philanthropy. And groups like that, and there are other organizations, other philanthropic institutions who already are connected to the folks and don't mind resourcing them because they know that's how the work's going to get done. I think that for more traditional philanthropy, it's time to examine how they need to manage these organizations who are trusted by folks in the community, who are the most impacted by all of these institutions and the combination, like the structural stuff. Examine your need to sort of lord over these Black and Brown led and centered organizations who are doing the work, and think about where that's from, and think about how they are perpetuating the problem. Throwing a couple dollars at it while like sort of micromanaging it and then bringing them out for folks to show them off is not really the way.
Mm-hmm. And thank you so much, Stephanie. I'll translate what you shared, and I know that you have another meeting to jump to, so I want to be cognizant of your time. And so as we say goodbye, please think of us in the future. We're here in support, in alignment with your life's mission. And thank you so much, Stephanie, and looking forward to having further conversations with you here live on the show as well. Gracias, Stephanie, porque yo sé que tenés otra reunión as a game changer, as a co-creator of a kinder and more just world. I know you have to jump into the next one. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and see you soon. Pues Stephanie ahorita se va a otra reunión apoyando a mejorar la situación de nuestra comunidad, y sus últimas palabras fue que también en el sector de fundaciones, que muchas veces dan dinero a organizaciones más grandes, pero no tienen sabiduría en cómo trabajar con las comunidades negras, afroamericanas y latinos, y que deben de ver cómo es que pueden aumentar el apoyo a grupos donde el liderazgo de esos grupos reflejan a las comunidades que quieren ayudar, y de que muchas veces cuando ella trabajaba con fundaciones vio de que no querían dar el mismo nivel de dólar por falta de confianza en líderes negros y latinos, y eso es algo de que tiene que cambiar para poder mejorar la situación comunitaria. Hay que apoyar el liderazgo de las personas que reflejan y conocen y saben muy bien y tienen la confianza de la comunidad latina y afroamericana. Y con eso, mil gracias por escuchar aquí en Juntos Podemos, Together We Can, y nos vemos hasta la próxima. And thank you so much for listening to Together We Can, and we'll see you at the next show. Have a great day.